Transformational change is something we all want. Professional development is something we all need to make that transformational change. But how often do we rush to change without fully developing those involved in the change? Hey everyone, Dr. Jones here with another podcast episode of Seeing to Lead. And this week, I talked to Jonathan Nalder, who talks about just those two things from the tech side. You see, Jonathan has a long history in tech. He's passionate about it. But he realizes that all the new tech coming out is a transformational change. The thing is, he explains, transformational change can come from simple steps. It's just a matter of stepping back and objectively looking at how well the learning is taking place so that we can improve on it and actually reach that change. You see, especially around tech, it's critical to define learning goals before purchasing anything. Otherwise, schools, education becomes an easy market for companies looking to push their items. Now, that's not to say it's necessarily a bad thing, but it might not be the thing we need. So in comes professional development. As leaders, as educators, we must make sure that professional development with new technology must not only focus on how the tech works, but also address the learning goals and outcomes. He gives a great example talking about the Wii. Yes, the video game Wii. Look, this is a great conversation with Jonathan. He's got a ton of great things to say and even leans into a little bit of a hint around AI and the importance of the human aspect of education. As always, I appreciate you listening. Do me a favor. Hop on social media and share your biggest takeaway from this episode right after you subscribe and leave an honest rating and review so that other people can hear just like you. Now, let's get to getting better with Jonathan Nalder on Seeing to Lead.
It's a fascinating time. It doesn't happen that often in human history where you have this kind of major change. But for me, and what we discovered with all those future skills, it's the human skills. It's relating to each other. That if we have more time for that, that's going to be a fantastic future. And to break it down into like a school example, I know there's a lot of teachers who are quite excited at the moment if they can cut back on their workload, just the amount of time it takes to prepare lessons and mark, etc. They're not just going to sit around. They're going to be able to actually sit down and have conversations with students.
Dr. Chris Jones here, and welcome to Seeing to Lead, a show designed to help leaders increase their ability to effectively support, engage, and empower their staff through intentional practices so that they create an environment where everyone reaches their greatest level of success. On Seeing to Lead, communication rules the day as we hear voices from both teachers and leaders in an effort to examine perspectives, highlight misunderstandings, and provide steps to ultimately bridge the gap between what teachers need and provide through thoughtful dialogue. This show is about amplifying voices, creating understanding, and providing information to help everyone continually improve. I want to personally thank you for taking the time. Now, let's get to getting better. Today on Seeing to Lead, I'm joined by Jonathan Nalder. Through 23 years in education, Jonathan has been at the edge of learning how digital tools, STEM, AR, VR, AI, environment sensors, and a focus on our humanity can boost the success of students everywhere. He has also learned by working with luminaries such as Dr. Rubin Puentedura, and I know I'm going to say this wrong, but I'm going to give it a run, and maybe Jonathan can correct me after I'm done with this, but Puentedura from SAMR, Dr. Larry Johnson, an MC, and Professor Stephen Heppell, Learnometer.
the FutureWe Community, and his current role as Chief Futures Officer at STEMpunks. How tools alone are not enough, but must be combined with futures thinking to truly transform lives. To this end, Jonathan is writing the first book in a series for fellow Edunauts to be titled Design Thinking 5.0. He is a globally awarded innovator, Mars Society ambassador, ISTE online presenter, and CoSpaces and Merge EDU ambassador. This is going to be a great conversation with Jonathan because, as you can hear in this bio, there's a lot about future, and there's a lot about a focus on humanity and the whole picture to boost success for students. So, Jonathan, welcome to the show.
Hey, Chris, Dr. Chris, should I say officially? Yeah, this is great to be joining you, obviously from other side of the world. Just goes to show how big the education community can be. Yeah, so I appreciate the intro. It's a bit of a auspicious day at my end. I know we have different education systems here in Australia. Our schools finished a couple of weeks ago for sort of end of year is end of our school year. And where I work at STEMpunks, obviously it's nearly Christmas. So today is actually our last official day of work. So I'm chatting to you on my last day before the holiday break. Yeah, it's a great way to go out.
Nice. So tomorrow, oddly enough, tomorrow is our last day before holiday break because Christmas is upon us. And, you know, as far as the official piece, yeah, we can do away with the official part from here on out. Chris works fine. But the other official part that I absolutely butchered and I feel bad about is Dr. Rubin from SAMR. How do you pronounce his name?
Yeah, Puentedura.
Okay. So there, we got all the official stuff out of the way, I guess.
Yeah.
But, you know, so thinking about that and going back and correcting part of your bio, there's a lot in that bio that has to do with a lot of things. So if you could round that out for us and then maybe even end up with a little explanation about STEMpunks.
Yeah. So I guess one of the advantages of having been in education for a while, it's just gone past 23 years just about for me, is that I guess you've been doing stuff long enough to maybe have a little bit of an idea about what works and what you're doing, I guess. You would hope as a educator that you're always learning yourself as well along the way. Yeah, so having the chance to have just tried and done a bunch of stuff, I guess, and found out what really works for me. I guess if I sort of go back to the beginning for me, my background is actually more in the arts and the humanities. I started my university just as a Bachelor of Arts student, so just trying out. We used to run little art galleries, and I did a lot of writing and poetry and theatre, that kind of stuff. But there's a lot in that kind of world where you're trying to understand the world, I guess, and understand people and their motivations. That's sort of the humanities where I'm coming from. After doing that for a couple of years, it was great fun, but I did get sick of being a poor art student. And so teaching, and I'd already done a couple of education subjects just because it's fascinating. So teaching was really my get a real job moment. It's like, okay, I need to get a degree that, is actually going to employ me and pay me as well. But yeah, absolutely loved it. I wasn't super smart. I was high school trained, but my combination, as we have in Australia, was two high school subjects, was drama and history, or theatre and history. So yeah, still very much humanities based, but there's almost no schools that want someone with that combination. You might be history and English, or it's just not a great combination. Yeah, I went out into the world of education. I ended up spent quite a bit of time in England to begin with, and did just supply teaching and contract teaching in some rather interesting inner city London schools. That was my first paid education gigs, and I probably learned an awful lot about behaviour management to begin with. But then, even back in Australia, there just wasn't a lot of call for that combination. So, in a way, it meant that I ended up working in a whole lot of different schools, doing a lot of different subjects and work, getting exposed to many different departments. Ended up working mostly in primary schools actually, and did a transition where I trained up as a learning difficulties teacher, what we call a learning difficulty. So it's not students with disabilities, but the learning difficulties end of things. So students who might be, 2 or 3 years behind when it comes to their literacy or their numeracy for various reasons. So not a like an in-classroom teacher, but working with smaller groups of students with those issues and trying to understand what was causing them and how to help them and design the programs that they needed. Yeah, so that was pretty fascinating. But basically, after doing that for a while, I started experimenting on the kids with different technologies, actually. And there's always, I guess, as I said, this quest of what's actually going to work for some of these kids with just terrible learning gaps and associated home life, etc. Yeah, and I mean, we started out with just really basic things like digital voice recorders was kind of a new thing. This is where that 23 years comes in. So instead of using a tape recorder in the classroom, we had little digital ones. But for me, that was, it's just a simple little device, but it was quite transformational because if you can imagine, I have a group of 5 or 6 generally boys sitting around a table and they take turns reading, a little passage. And for one, that's really boring for the other kids while they wait for their turn. And the teachers could relate to this kind of scenario. But then once a student finishes reading, or maybe at the end when they've partly forgotten, then you give them a bit of feedback about, with how they went with pronunciation and sounding out words and et cetera. And it's just really inefficient. And, it's kind of, you do what you can, obviously, with the resources and time that you have. But a little digital voice recorder can split them into pairs. They can do all the reading at once and just record each other. So they're actually active. They actually had a job while the other one's reading. And then it's an instant replay. It's like, oh, let's listen back to it. Boom. And if students needed to listen back 3 or 4, 6 times before they picked up all the errors themselves, self-feedback, they could, because it's just a boom, replay, instead of all that time waiting, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, so even that simple little thing was pretty transformational. The students could just focus on reading and listening to themselves. They didn't have to try and troubleshoot themselves while they were reading, I guess, because it was recorded. They can do that bit afterwards. So even that lessening that cognitive load over time. Yeah, and I'm just thinking, this is a little $50 digital voice recorder. I think the worst thing that happened was some batteries got stolen a couple of times. It's a really small investment, from a resources perspective, but quite transformational in terms of, the students and their learning. So that's, I guess, kicked off a bit of a career pivot towards, I wonder what other technologies, and how that can really assist students. And we got this is sort of very early days of iPod touches and some little laptops, etc. And sort of kicked off this journey of interest for me around what I call personal learning devices. Devices that could help students be independent of me as they're not just reliant on you as the teacher. And then once we got to a world of, apps and podcasts and, things like Khan Academy and, suddenly there's all these resources that if the students know how to access them and, assess them as well. So we were actually, some of my work with those students changed from, okay, let's just go through the same rote activities, over and over, the repetition, which is definitely useful for a lot of those kids. But let's also add in, well, how are you going to find a resource to help you when I'm not around? And because of that technology that was there, that kind of made that available. So in terms of the bio, that kind of took me on that kind of journey, and I sort of transitioned to training teachers in what I had found worked, working with sort of the education department across the state where I am here in Australia, in Queensland. Yeah, so pretty fascinating. And when you're in that position of training teachers, of course, there's a lot of pressure because being a teacher yourself, like, how precious their time is, how small the window for, change and everything is. So that's kind of been quite a privilege. Yeah, to work in that space for a number of years, and well, let's face it, it's an excuse to try out new tech all the time. I'm definitely one of those early adopter type people. We need that. We need the teachers who will actually take that new stuff and test it out and try it and see, is it actually going to be classroom ready and fit the classroom or not. We don't want to do that just for its own sake, and that's a trap that I've fallen into, especially in my early days. Just getting excited about the tech, the shiny stuff, as we call it, and not doing enough work on but does it actually work in the classroom kind of things? that's always been something I've tried to be very aware of. And as we mentioned again, I've been really fortunate as some of the mentors and people I've got to work with, people who'd already kind of got that it's about the pedagogy and the learning and the learning goals for students. And then the tools that you choose come along later. And even today, a lot of, with STEM punks, you go into schools and they go, oh, we've got this cupboard full of drones or this cupboard full of robots or, and it was bought because they wanted some tech, not because they had some learning goals that they were really passionate about achieving. And then they decided which was the best tech. It's this very, very weird thing. And I'm sure you, Chris, probably have plenty of stories of this, and everyone, educators listening. It's this weird thing in education, whether we're just the victims of what we're seen as an easy market from companies that sell stuff without us having gone on that journey first of deciding the learning goals and then choosing. Yeah, we seem to be very susceptible to that marketing promise.
I've always been surprised by that. I've always, in education, when you talk about science or anything like that, like the scientific method and you test hypotheses and all about this. And then when you run a test, you have to have a certain amount of longitudinal data to make sure it's working. And we, when it comes to technology, don't do any of that. We get an initiative going for about a year and a half, then we get rid of it. Then we do another one for a year and a half, where we never let it sit around long enough to see if we get any real progress out of it or benefits from it. It's just, that's always been amazing to me, such a contradiction in what we talk about and what we actually do.
Yeah, the lack of rigor around that. So yeah, it's a weird thing, but that's definitely something I've always tried to keep in mind. I know, so those early days when I was trying out some of those tech with students, I got the chance to tell some of the rest of the teachers at my school about it and show them various things. And yeah, there was a few other teachers who were interested in that sort of, it was digital pedagogy, digital literacy, sort of early days of awareness around that, I guess. And we actually managed to get a grant and got some money to get a Nintendo Wii. And we had a space in our library. The librarian was great. And we set it up with a sort of a projector, and we had 4 controllers. And, I'm sort of really excited at the time and thinking, there's this cool stuff that will happen, like students, motivated students. And in my head, there was like an Olympics game. So you could have 4 students who were doing, say, a running activity, and they could time themselves, get all that data, take it back to the classroom and, compare and graph it and et cetera, et cetera. That's in my head. That's what I was imagining. So then I ran PD for the teachers and but the PD that I ran was, this is how you turn it on. This is how you connect one of the remotes, the Wiimotes. This is how you launch the software. Okay, go for it. And then 6 months later, I sort of sat back going, why is it being used for reward time? So the number one use was, all right, these 5 kids from my class have been good all term or whatever. They get to go down and play at the end, on the last day of school or something as a reward. And I'm going, this is not like,
yeah.
But yeah, so it took me a little while, but it was part of my journey as well, realizing, actually, we didn't talk about the pedagogy or, any of that at all.
Yeah.
And so that was, an important learning moment for me, I guess.
Yeah, no. That's important. We say it a lot, the pedagogy and learning goals before the technology. And, so how do let me ask you this question. So you training teachers and knowing that, and I love the journey you took, by the way, which I've got to ask you a question about that after, but we'll get to that. How does a leader ensure, and for principals, it might be difficult because the central office in our setup here in the States dictates what's bought or what initiative there is, but how do principals either step in to help or step in to protect those teachers by, I guess, focusing on the pedagogy and the learning goals instead of just getting the tech or the equipment in their hands? So that because change is difficult enough, but so that change is actually meaningful and teachers actually benefit from the new technologies coming in.
Yeah, no, great. Great question. That's sort of the keeping it real kind of question. Yeah, so for me, from my perspective, having been a teacher and that's kind of a little bit more senior role in training and supporting other teachers, I'd always seen admin as being this incredibly vital, admin principals, deputy principals, et cetera, as being almost the most vital sort of piece in the sense of they're the ones who can make the time, make the priorities, etc. And when I talk about learning goals, I've always had this sense when I was in schools that a school can only really do 2 or 3 big things at once. There's the amount of new initiatives that come in, and we need a whole new behavioral management policy, and everyone needs to be up to speed on that and be consistent. Or, new curriculum elements that are coming in, or, whatever it is, all those systemic elements. And then you may want to have, we want to connect with our community and we want our school to feel like a family, or whatever the more personal, goal might be for the school. But there's only room, and it's just a headspace thing, or it's just reality that, you can only do two or 3 of those at a time. Everything else just falls by the wayside with how busy everyone gets. And doesn't matter how important they are or how much you would want them to be, or, all be done. That's it. So obviously principals have that key role in helping decide what are those going to be, and then allocating the time for that. And when it comes to this transformational stuff, look, every school will always have those teachers, 1 or 2 or whatever, here or there, who are doing some of it themselves, somehow, and that will naturally maybe spread a little bit, to their colleagues, which is great. And then maybe even a little bit like me, where you're like, occasionally on a staff training day, you might get to have an hour or 2 to spread it maybe a little bit wider. But ultimately, if it's not one of those 2 or 3 big things. So however a principal can help make that happen. And I'm not talking about make technology training one of those things. I'm talking about, and what we use now at STEM Punks, where, you might think STEM, science, technology, engineering, maths, that's needed, that's great. But our big thing is really design thinking, to be honest, and solving real problems. And STEM is the great way to do that. It fits perfectly with STEM. So if it's design thinking, actually take your school on that journey first, where you understand what do we really care about, and our community, what are the needs of the students, etc. What are the goals that the teachers are passionate about, and then start defining, what are we going to focus on here for us? Well, let's come up with the ideas, and now let's try out some things, but going on that personal, local school journey, and then deciding, all right, now we're going to buy these particular tools or use these particular programs, making that one of those, that journey, one of those, big 2 or 3 things would be the way to do it. Yeah, and there's no one else who can shield teachers a little bit from some of the other commitments, or allocate the budget as needed to carve out the space to do that, I guess.
Yeah, the whole idea of less is more.
Yeah, that as well.
Just so they can focus on it.
Supporting your teachers and students seems to be a struggle. They just don't seem to be engaged. You wish they would take more responsibility for their learning and culture of the building, but they just don't seem to be empowered enough to do it. So, my question is, have you checked out the book Seeing to Lead yet? It's all about creating a true educational experience where learning, growth, leadership, and community take center stage. Full of strategies and resources, Seeing to Lead is about attaining that goal by employing a model that supports, engages, and empowers all individuals to become leaders themselves. Pick up a copy today at seeingtolead.com. That's seeingtolead.com. Remember, you don't become a leader and then decide you need to support and recognize others more than yourself. It is the moment you realize it's about supporting and recognizing others that you become a leader. seeingtolead.com.
You mentioned STEM Punks again. So STEM Punks, interesting name. Talk to me about STEM Punks a little bit. Like, what is it you do?
Yeah, well, STEM Punks is great because I spent that time working in the education system. Then I worked for a sort of large adult training organization here, TAFE, at sort of vet level, I guess. And then as a lot of educators do at this point, went out on my own with consulting and set up a community called FutureWe, which is around basically what are the future skills that students are going to need. There's an awful lot potentially. There's a lot of talk in that space, but it's still very undefined. So that was great. I had about three and a bit years working in that space, developed some Mars and space focus workshops, which is sort of a personal passion of mine, but as a way of creating really open learning experiences for students. But I had no idea about the business side of things. So trying to succeed at all of those things was not really for me. So teaming up with STEM punks who are also here in Brisbane had a great, our founder, Michael, he's sort of has an engineer but entrepreneur background. So he kind of had that bigger picture business side of things sorted, but really values having the educators drive the programs. So that's been a fantastic nearly 4 years for me, actually. Yeah, working with STEM punks. So obviously STEM, they couldn't trademark steampunks, which is sort of a union. People sort of more used to, the term you're more used to. Steampunks is just too generic a term. So STEM punks, and people often ask us, oh, where's the A? You guys, do you not do art or other things? But, we are very much STEM plus design thinking. And that's obvious when you sort of see our programs and the way we work, etc. But, we've got to be honest, the punk in the name is good to have as well. And that's the idea of always asking questions and looking at things that bit differently, keeping that kind of inspiration, I guess, as part of the DNA, I guess, what STEM punks does. So, it's very much, all of our programs are really based around what we call immersive themes or stories. So, like space, this is one of our major programs. We got to work with a whole bunch of, I'll show it to you, Space 2101.
Nice.
We got to work with a whole bunch of astronauts in the last couple of years on this program, a lot of NASA astronauts. And it's the idea that it's the year 2101. And by then, we think it's going to be normal for humans to live and work in space. But what we want to know is, do students have what it takes to be one of them? And we'll kick them off on a learning journey where you start in Earth training and then you move up to, hey, you've been successful. It's now the year 2102 and you're working in orbit. And then a year later, you get to work on the moon, and then another sort of year beyond that, you get to work on Mars. So there's an immersive kind of story that goes along and different challenges. And now, students can get immersed in that, and there's room for their own ideas and their solutions where you go through the design thinking steps each time. Now, they learn a whole bunch of technology and maths and, science along the way. But that's for me. I'll be honest with you, Chris, there was a time where I was very anti-STEM. Again, coming from all that sort of humanities arts area, you kind of look over and go, why are they getting all this funding and attention? It's just,
right.
It's just kind of boring maths and, science and stuff. Like, they have a lot of resources already. What's the deal? So here I am working at STEM now, a company like STEM punks and going into schools and doing these programs. But I guess what clicked for me one time was that actually, even especially in a high school setting, maybe similar in the US, but having 4 departments actually working and collaborating together is pretty rare.
Yep, that's heaven.
And that's pretty special. And once you get, 3 or 4 of those working together, then of course there's, you start to build a culture, and other departments can come in as well, and be part of that. So I go, that's something I can really support. And the other aspect is it's always based around solving a problem. What's a real world problem that affects us that we're going to investigate and solve? And again, that's an approach to learning that I can really get behind and support. And I feel like, as I mentioned, my background in humanities, I feel like that's a contribution I can bring then, so that, we don't, somewhere like STEM punks, we don't just get stuck on, okay, we're only going to look at sort of hard maths or hard science type problems, but we're going to keep it more open. So one of the example, I guess, scenarios I can share is when we're doing Mars, for instance, rather than looking at a specific problem that's a bit close-ended, like, how do we solve the radiation problem, or how do we get enough water for settlers on Mars? Still interesting topics, but our approach would be much more, okay, well, what do humans need to be happy and healthy living on Mars?
Right.
Living so far away from home, what do they need to be happy and healthy? Now, some students might concentrate in on the radiation or the water, and that's completely valid and fine. But they might also go in really interesting, different directions that you couldn't have planned for. So I've told this story lots of times, but I had one group of girls who basically built a rainbow at their Mars base. And, we always like to have a showcase, and the students stood up and we had their base up on the screen there. For those interested, we use CoSpaces, a 3D design software where they could actually build this Mars base in 3D, and then here's this rainbow, and it sort of pops up on the screen, and everyone's sitting there going, oh, did they really get the brief? Like, it looks colorful, great, but then they started explaining it that, this is the only rainbow on Mars. And people would come from all over just to come and see that. And it's worth investing the water for the water spray and, the light energy, etc. It's worth investing in that just to give people that little taste of home.
That's funny.
And as an adult, like when you're as older, you get locked more into let's be functional and logical, and those are some of my favorite experiences, I guess, when you can keep it open-ended and give students that space to see what might they come up. We had boys come up with a version of soccer or football on Mars, what that would be like in low gravity or lower gravity. But it's an incentive to meet people, the competition, but also, you're meeting other people. There's the fitness element that would fit that brief of happy and healthy on Mars. Yeah, just all kinds of weird and wonderful.
Yeah, the idea of all the problem solving.
Yeah, when you give them that space. Now, along the way, as I said, they're learning a whole bunch of the science and the maths and the other elements.
Right.
That they need. Yeah, and a part of our mission at STEMpunks, I guess, is trying to get as many students as possible interested in. If I walk into a classroom at a school that I've never been to before, it might be, some older students even, year 10s or year 11s, so it's definitely too cool for school, and they've seen it all. And how are you going to get all of those students, not just the ones who might be more interested naturally in STEM, but how are you going to get everyone in that room to find their little way into STEM? And that's where those sort of more open, scenarios come in.
Yeah, well, there's so much you can fit under those open scenarios when you're asking a question like that. They're trying to solve a larger problem. Just, and we talk a lot about equity and the importance of diverse experiences and perspectives. Yeah. Well, when you put an open-ended problem like that up and then ask people, like you're saying, what would be a happy and healthy life, how many different interpretations of happy and healthy you get from the students, which then drives their learning, and they're performing all the conceptual pieces to get to where they need to get to. That's fantastic stuff.
Kind of feel like, if I hadn't had that humanities background, it might not, dawn on me, but I'm still very interested more in that. Oh, how do humans really think? And especially the empathize stage of design thinking. And certainly when I was doing the work with that FutureWe community I mentioned, that was sort of about 200 experts in education, but also other fields, meeting and discussing and basically working out what are these future skills. And that initial kind of, we used to talk about it being just the place phase, but it very much aligns with the empathize. Let's just research and explore, get your heads around the topic, etc. first. And for me, that's that really human element. Often, we don't have time for an education. It's very, you're introducing a new topic, a new subject to students. The first thing you do is here's the rubric, here's the assessment sheet.
Right.
And you've already locked it in at that point.
Yeah, you've already capped it off.
And, I guess it's the way that, the system has to work in a lot of ways with timeframes and how much you have to fit in. But if you can ever carve out time before that, just for that open exploring and playing, one, you're acknowledging that you're humans and this is how, when we come across something new, that's what we like to do. That's what works for us. Just play around and be curious, make some space for that before you get to the define stage of, all right, here's the actual assessment sheet or rubric or whatever. Yeah. And every time that we get to do that, by the time you get to what the students present at the end, it's always much richer. And then, they're more passionate about it and interested in it, and they'll go so much further in their motivation to what they learn because they've had that chance initially just to explore and find their little piece of it. But not easy to do.
No.
And it doesn't come naturally to the when you talk about the education system, it doesn't fit naturally into that. So again, admin principles, if you can carve out that as one of the things, the attitudes, the priorities, that's great.
Perfect. So I have two questions. We're getting near the end of the podcast, and I have two questions I ask every guest, but I do have to ask you a quick one just off the top of my head while I'm sitting here thinking. You've mentioned a couple of times the future skills, so to speak. Is it a long list that you folks have nailed it down to, or is it Are there a top 5, a top 3 that you can share?
Yeah, it was fascinating, the work that we did. It was about a year and a half or so just of people throwing in, like, what is the master list? Like, what is all the stuff that people consider? And I mean, that list was up to over 60 or 70. And we're talking, there's nothing kind of groundbreaking, like things like growth mindset, and, soft skills, so leadership. I mean, you name it, like curiosity, creativity. There's just a big range. And then we did some work basically summarizing that down. We got it down to about sort of 50, I guess, key ones, mindsets and skills, etc., which is still way too much.
It's so hard to narrow it down.
We were then able to, and it was a great piece of work to kind of categorize those, etc. And it really did fall into about 5 kind of categories, which were a nice little progression. And the first one was, that just exploring and playing type stage. Second one was around relating, like your team, your people, making sure that's all in place and set up first. And only then did you get to more that defining, actual planning type stage. Then you want to prototype and test it, make sure it works. And then the last one actually was one that we often miss out on as well. There's a whole bunch of things that fell into a category around showcasing and telling your story. It doesn't matter how great project you've done, if you can't actually explain it or show it to other people, then the impact's going to be obviously not great. So that was another sort of final important thing to have on the end there. And I mean, FutureWe.org, so that project's kind of been on pause for about 3 years. But the work and the studies, and there was a self-assessment tool as well we developed for adults and students as well, where they could go in and just say, I wonder where I am up to against these future skills. So that's still all available at FutureWe.org. And then I've sort of brought, as I said, all that work into what we're doing at STEM Punks as well. And design thinking is not quite as broad as that, but as we use it, that empathize stage can really also be the playing and exploring stage. And then we generally always will have that showcase at the end as well. After you've done your prototyping and you've iterated and you evaluated and iterated, then you'll want to have a showcase where you show it off. So that's that future skills. And the other interesting thing, I know we're getting towards the end, but I wanted to mention is obviously, AI is kind of the big thing at the moment.
Just a little bit.
Anyone who's been a sci-fi fan, science fiction fan, or you've seen, movies based in the future, there's always been this way off at some point, we'll have all these kind of AI tools, but it's kind of starting to happen now, and not just, I guess, in labs or in big companies or whatever, but, tools that anyone can just jump in and start using. For me, that's the difference in the last year. Yeah, so there's we might need to have a whole other discussion sometime, Chris, about the effect of that. But in terms of future skills, the quick summary is if the technology can replace our mental abilities, like what are we going to do, as humans instead? Because we kind of had this period, and this come from my history teacher background, I guess. We had this period where basically forever, if humans and work meant physical, like we did something physically, that was and there's only like what. Say medieval times, etc. Up to then, only 2% or whatever people who were literate and who could do more the mental work. But then, of course, the Industrial Revolution, a lot of machines, and then electricity, etc., etc. Most of us had to switch to mental labor for our work.
Yep.
And that's made our whole modern society possible, being able to write and read and communicate, and then technology, etc., of course. But now if a lot of our mental labor can be done by machines, like what? So it's a fascinating time. It doesn't happen that often in human history where you have this kind of major change. But for me, and what we discovered with all those future skills, it's the human skills. It's relating to each other. That if we have more time for that, that's going to be a fantastic future. And to break it down into like a school example, I know there's a lot of teachers who are quite excited at the moment if they can cut back on their workload, just the amount of time it takes to prepare lessons and mark, etc. They're not just going to sit around. They're going to be able to actually sit down and have conversations with students. Whether it's just giving proper feedback, being able to sit down and discuss properly, or whether it's just building those relationships and, being more human. And the education system is a system. It's very dehumanizing. Mm-hmm. How else are you going to mass educate everyone? Just sort of being really honest. Like it's got to be a system, but at the same time, it's sort of, it's not great for most humans. There are some people really love that. The more systematized, the better. It really does really suit some people, but in general. So yeah, that would be a great future if we're all freed up more to be more human. And very much, those future skills, a large percentage of them ended up being in that area. How do we relate to each other and support each other? And they're kind of called soft skills, I guess, in business circles.
Yep.
But yeah, the feeling was that those are going to become more and more important. I mean, it kind of makes sense. Yeah, to me, when you look at it that way. So a little bit about that. Yeah,
no, that's excellent because AI is such a big thing. You've had such a winding road leading up to the point where you are now, or where you find yourself now. If you weren't where you are now, involved in education, educating teachers on STEM and design thinking, who, not what, do you think you would be?
Oh, who, not what?
Yeah.
I mean, like my fantasy version is, working somewhere in the space industry, I guess. I did train before I went into anything else. Straight out of high school, I actually did pilot training.
Really?
Which was amazing at such a young age. So yeah, there's a whole alternate career there. Potentially would be pretty fantastic. But, I certainly looking back now, like the impact, and I think we were talking before we started recording about, where do you feel you can have the maximum impact? And there's a lot to be gained in life about focusing on that. So, having that sort of more traditional individual career, thinking about it now, because it's a good question, Chris. Probably, definitely want to choose the way that it's gone in terms of that impact side of things.
Cool. So, the last question I want to ask you that I ask everybody is, what's the most important piece of advice you would give to leaders as they work to better support, engage, and empower those they serve?
There's probably many, many answers to that.
I've heard a ton.
Yeah. And, that's one of the great things about your podcast. I think for me, my suggestion would be to carve out that time for yourself, first of all, for being playful and exploring. And it might even just be that, you have a certain program you need to plan out and implement at the school that's coming up, or a new initiative, or it might just be something in your personal life. But if you can start a habit of, before I jump straight into the full-on planning stage, I'm going to give myself that space and time just to read up, explore some things, go and visit some places, chat with people. Don't make any, before you even starting to make any decisions, anything like that. So if you can make that a personal habit to give yourself permission for that, it might just be, planning your Christmas trip or whatever it is. Start that as a habit. And then if you get that personal sense of, this is actually this is the way to do it, then you'll start to give your staff permission and, can start to become part of the culture. And then the teachers can start giving their students permission, for that same sort of thing. And it's not something you can kind of, how do you mandate something like that time period or that approach? It's, how do you put that into the school structure or whatever? How do you define a culture in that, our cultural priorities? It's a bit ephemeral, I guess. But, once someone starts doing it, it can spread. And then you definitely see everyone being more human to each other, basically, but, the more that it spreads.
That was nice. So, you tied that right back into a circle about humanities and understanding the world and those around us.
Yeah, it's the way to do it.
Cool. So, hey, Jonathan, I had a great time talking today, and we clearly maybe uncovered a topic, that being AI, that we can talk about again later at some point. We could probably talk for quite a while about that. But if anybody wants to get in touch with you, what's the best way to do that?
So you can find a bunch of my links, I'm generally pretty active on different social media places. So if you go to jnxys.net, you can generally find links to my email and some of those social accounts as well. There's a lot to chat about these topics and meet more people in the area. So jnxyz.net. You'll be able to follow me up from there. That'd be great.
Cool. I will definitely put that in the show notes. And thank you very much for coming on today.
Yeah, cool, Chris. This is where we get to say happy holidays, Merry Christmas.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'd love to chat again in the future, and a shout out to the the X Factor and Codebreaker, and here in Australia, the Mammoth EDU communities of teacher authors. I think that's how we originally connected, was through some of those, some of those networks of teachers writing books for teachers. So shout out to those guys. Yeah.
Perfect.
Well, that's a wrap, but not the end. Next step, be sure to take action on something you heard here today. Hey, thanks for listening to the Seen to Lead podcast. If you would like to connect for any reason, email me at drchrissj@gmail.com or catch me on Twitter at drcsjones. If you've gotten any value from the Seen to Lead podcast today, you can help me and other leaders create a world-class environment through a teacher-centric approach by subscribing to the show, leaving an honest rating and review, and sharing this episode on social media with your most valuable takeaway. Also, one last thing. Have you had a chance to pick up my latest 5-star rated book yet? Grab your copy of Seeing to Lead anywhere you buy books or at seeingtolead.com. That's seingtolead.com, where you can learn more and continue to improve. Now go have a successful week.